When Arkham Asylum was released, a lot of people in the industry thought that this was probably one of the best superhero games in terms of how it was developed, in terms of writing, atmosphere, and combat. Now, one of the really cool things about this particular game is it did really set the tone for how the other Arkham games would be viewed and would be seen. Following that was Arkham City, which also had an updated and upgraded version of the Arkham combat style, where Batman employed at least close to 20 different fighting styles incorporated into different kinds of combat sequences where he used those to take out bad guys. Now, there is something to be said about these first two Arkham games in the series. They really did bring a lot of action in terms of gameplay, and you can also discuss on a separate plane the stealth mechanics and all of that. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on the combat and how it eventually evolved from a much more raw form combat into a very smooth and polished combat system in Arkham Knight. So, after Arkham City was released to critical success, the following game that came after it was Arkham Origins. Now, this was developed by Warner Bros. Montreal, so it was not a Rocksteady game, but it did have all the Rocksteady assets because, according to an interview by one of the Warner Bros. Montreal heads, he did say that in their time, when it came time for them to develop Arkham Origins, that Rocksteady actually gave them all their Arkham City assets. Now, Arkham Origins was very different in the sense that they took that game and they kind of reverse engineered a whole lot of things. They made sure that the atmosphere looked different. They changed a lot of the sound. They used different soundtracks, used a very different atmosphere. But I think they tried to keep it as close to their own work as they possibly could. And for many of you that may complain about the validity of Arkham Origins being a good or not so good game, on this channel, we consider that Arkham Origins is a very, very good game. In fact, we consider it a great game. Now, yes, it was a game that had to be pulled out on the old platforms and hence didn't see a lot of acceptance in the Batman community. But for those of us who are hardcore Batman game fans, we can definitely tell you that we've enjoyed this game and this title by itself. But all of that combat sequencing and all the work put in from the first Arkham game all the way through this Arkham Origins game did not necessarily see a lot of unique aspects in terms of the combat. Yes, there were a lot of new things that you could say, okay, these things were added by Warner Bros. Montreal, or there were a few things from maybe Arkham City that were really, really unique, but they didn't necessarily change from, one game to another. Now, I have to admit, in Arkham Origins, the boss fights were some of the most engaging boss fights in the Batman games. It was very, very difficult for you to just say, oh, they just kind of recycle those boss fights from Arkham City into this game. No, Warner Bros. Montreal did their best to make sure that that game stood out in its boss fights and make sure that you as the gamer, you were able to engage differently. Now, if we want to take an example, we have to look at the example of Deathstroke. Deathstroke's fight against Batman in Arkham Origins is one of the most highly praised fight sequences in all the Arkham games. Now, it was a little bit of QTE-ish, but it did provide a different kind of fighting that you could get. Now, I don't know why the developers went that decision where they didn't allow for you to do a more freestyle melee combat against Deathstroke. You only had very limited parameters in the way they wanted the camera angles to go, but I think that actually did work. It worked for a bad guy, a boss fight, where that is somebody who could somewhat almost match wits with Batman in terms of physical melee combat. But then the way they eventually close out the fight sequence when Batman comes out on top, it really does provide some swag as to how good Batman really is in his combat. Fast forward from that game, we see Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight really did change the way we all look at the way Batman plays in terms of his finishes, in terms of a lot more of his combat. And this is where it's very interesting to stop and take a look and say, how much did Batman really change in terms of combat? And I would say he changed a lot because from what we saw not only the use of, hands and feet and a lot of bone breaking and bone crushing, we eventually started to see things like a lot more gadget takedowns and a lot different, mechanics in terms of how his new suit, which he got, eventually played a role in his combat. Now, that's very important because Rocksteady was able to incorporate these things and make them work for the story. So you're able to use Batman to do a whole lot of takedowns. You're able to use, a lot more camera angles and get better effects, and all the sound effects also made it quite better. Now, from Arkham Asylum all the way through Arkham Knight, we see a very, very huge progression, and the combat system we have in Arkham Knight is definitely unparalleled in terms of how you can compare it with the other Arkham games. There was definitely a sign of progress, even when the game changed from one studio to another. Now we're at the cusp of a new Arkham game potentially being announced, and I think it's very important to look back and say, we think that Warner Brothers Montreal can deliver a Batman combat system from where Rocksteady stopped. Because if you go back and think about it, this game is changing hands in some sense. And I almost feel like just as Rocksteady handed Warner Brothers Montreal all their assets from Arkham City, they probably shared the same with Arkham Knight. Unless Rocksteady is working on a future Batman game to continue in the premise, then maybe they may have held on to some proprietary assets. But I think they would have handed a lot of those to them. And now Warner Brothers Montreal can take from that and develop their own aspect, their own spin on the Batman combat. But I am very confident, because of the work that they did in Arkham Origins, that they're most likely going to be able to do a very solid work in Arkham Legacy. This is what we want to see. We want to see Batman Arkham Legacy get a combat system that is actually better or improved from where Rocksteady stopped. Now, I don't know how fluid it's going to be. Now, that is the one thing I have to say. Fluidity, though, in Arkham Origins felt a little slower than Arkham City. I mean, I guess this is just as a result of them maybe changing a lot of things and wanting their combat to be in one way, its own thing. But I would say compared to Arkham City, Arkham Origins combat could have been a lot more fluid in terms of the main game. Now, if you go into the challenge modes where you fight as Bruce Wayne, where you fight as Deathstroke, where you fight as Batman to do the combat challenges, there is a better level of free flow combat there, because those DLCs, those aspects of the game do have, for some strange reason, a very good polish to them. Now, I'm not saying it's strange in a bad way. I'm just saying that they felt better than in-game fighting. Whereas in Rocksteady's iteration of Arkham, you had that same quality of fighting, whether you were in-game or whether you were in the combat challenges. And this is another thing that I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping that Warner Brothers Montreal, would emphasize a lot of the combat challenges and bring some really cool stuff. If you think about Arkham Origins, the 100-to-1 DLC or addition in the challenge, that was part of, some of the DLC, is something that's very cool. You got 100, bad guys spawn on you, and you could take them all out in one free flow combat without dropping your combo, or you could do it without getting any damage. There were fun ways to actually play this mode with like a mini game inside of it. And I'm hoping that we're going to see something like that where, you get 100 talents to just you, Batman, or to just you, Bruce Wayne, or to just you, maybe another protagonist like maybe Batgirl, maybe even Nightwing, or even Damian himself. Which I'm saying Damian because the comics do put all these people in there. It's not like I'm saying Damian because I know that Damian's going to be there. So this is just something to think about. This is something to look forward to. I'm really excited about the Arkham Legacy game, the Batman Arkham Legacy game. I think if we get this announcement, it's going to be one of the announcements that will rock the superhero video game creation world, and a lot of fans are really, really excited for this. So come December 12th or 15th, I can't remember, we're going to be watching the Video Game Awards very intently. In fact, PlayStation does have a State of Play that's coming up very soon, but nobody really knows if that's going to be perhaps a place where they probably do like a little intro or a little, drop or drip marketing. But we are looking to the Video Game Awards, and hopefully Warner Brothers will show up this year with a Batman Legacy game, and hopefully we can see some combat in the trailer. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for your time and audience. I appreciate you guys for watching the video. If you have not subscribed, please do so for Batman content and commentary. We enjoy talking about all kinds of, Batman video game aspects and theory. And if you, enjoy the video, leave a comment in the comment section. And I guess I'll see you in my next video. I'm XGamerX. Peace out.